What is up, baseball fans? Thanks for tuning into the channel for the next episode of Ryan's Ghost. I am your host, Salbo the Stat Guy. In today's video, I wanted to break down and talk about 1980s pitchers and the run support that they received from their teams. One of my previous videos, I broke down run support and pitchers in the 1970s, and it was really interesting and fascinating to take a look at that. So I wanted to do it with the 1980s, and I plan on doing a video where I'll break down starters from the 1990s and basically do the same thing. But if we just kind of look back at the 70s, you had a lot of starters throw a lot of innings, obviously start a lot of games. And so in the 1970s, in that decade, 25% of all games started ended up complete games. Whereas in the 1980s, that number fell to only 15%. And part of the reason for that was you started to see teams go with 5-man rotations now instead of a 4-man rotation. So obviously pitchers had less starts and they pitched less innings as well. And so during the 70s, you actually had 15 starting pitchers start 300 or more games. But that number dropped down to 7 in the 1980s. But the number of pitchers that had 200 starts actually stayed consistent. There were 56 pitchers that achieved it in the 1970s, and there were 55 in the 1980s. So that number only varied by just one pitcher. In the 1970s, you also had 31 pitchers who started 40 or more games in a season. I believe one season you actually had 12 pitchers. I think that was 1972 or 73, where 12 pitchers actually started 40 or more games. But if we go to the 1980s, you only had one pitcher, actually two pitchers, who started 40 or more games in the 1980s. That was Charlie Huff and Jim Clancy. Also in the 70s, you had 20 pitchers throw 300 innings in a season, but by the 1980s, that number was all the way down to one. Only Steve Carlton threw 300 innings in a season in the 1980s. Now, part of the reason for that as well was the closer became more prevalent in the 1980s, and you started to see teams use a closer more and more often, and that's another reason why the complete game started to drop as well. If you look at the 1970s, there were actually 12 pitchers that had 30 saves in a season, and that number jumped to 30 pitchers in the 1980s. And it wasn't uncommon either for you to see a closer pitched 1, 2, or maybe even 3 innings to get a save. So it wasn't until the late 80s, Tony La Russa and Dennis Eckersley, where you started to see a closer basically just pitch 1 inning. So today I wanted to look at the pitchers from the 1980s, and as I said, there were 55 pitchers in total who had 200 or more starts, and I just wanted to break down and just kind of list them off real quick. Number one on the list was Jack Morris. He had the most starts of any pitcher in the 1980s. He had 332 starts. Second was Dave Stieb, longtime Toronto Blue Jay, who had 331 starts. Then you had Jim Clancy, another Toronto Blue Jay, with 317 starts. Fourth was Nolan Ryan with 314. Bob Welch had 311. Bob Knepper had 306. Frank Tanata had 304. Floyd Bannister had 294. Doyle Alexander had 289. Rick Rhoden and Burt Blyleven both had 288 starts. Fernando Valenzuela had 287. Richard Dawson had 283. Charlie Huff had 282. Mike Scott, Mike Flanagan both had 276. Mike Krukow had 274. Mike Witt for the Angels had 272. Frank Viola had 271. Don Sutton had 270. Ed Whitson had 263. Rick Sutcliffe had 260. Joe Negro had 259. Jerry Royce 258. Dan Petrie had 256. Dennis Martinez had 255. Tommy John had 254. Mike Moore had 252. Phil Negro and Bruce Hurst both had 250 games started. Rick Mailer 247 along with Scotty McGregor. Bill Gullickson had 242. Rick Russell and Bob Forsch had 241. Steve Carlton had 240. John Tudor had 235. Ron Guidry 232. Charlie Leibrandt 229. Mike Boddicker had 228. Shane Raleigh had 225. Walt Terrell had 219 along with Scott Sanderson and Joaquin Andahar. Eric Schau had 218. Steve Trout had 215. Rick Honeycutt, Mario Soto both had 213. John Candelaria, the Candyman, had 212. Bobby Ojeda had 210. Dennis Eckersley, Ron Darling, Andy Hawkins all had 206 starts. Mike Smithson had 204. And Storm Davis rounded out the list with 200 starts in the 1980s. Now, if we break it down by the categories I used in my last video, so starters that received 0, 1, or 2 runs of support in their starts, There was actually a tie for first. Nolan Ryan and Frank Tanana both started 110 games in the 1980s where they got 0, 1, or 2 runs of support. And if you remember from our last video, Nolan Ryan had the most starts of any pitcher in the 1970s with 0, 1, or 2 runs. So he led in that category in both decades, the 1970s and the 1980s. Next on the list was Fernando Valenzuela. He had 101 starts where he got 0, 1, or 2 runs of support. Then you had Bob Knepper with 96, Dave Stieb with 94, Burt Blyleven had 94 as well, Floyd Bannister had 93, Jack Morris and Rick Russell had 92, and Bob Welch had 91. Now, if we look at the pitchers who had the highest winning percentage in those starts where they got 0, 1, or 2 runs, so even though they weren't getting much support, they still managed to win their games. Number 1 on the list was actually a surprise. It was Bobby Ojeda, who pitched for the Boston Red Sox and the New York Mets in the 1980s. He had 33% of his starts where he got a win when his team scored 0, 1, or 2 runs for him. He was 17 wins and 35 losses. Number 2 on the list was a Cardinals pitcher named John Tudor, who won 24% of his starts. He won 14 wins and 44 losses. Next was Fernando Valenzuela. He won 21 games and lost 70 for a 23% winning percentage. Ron Darling was next with 24% of his wins, 10 wins and 34 losses. Nolan Ryan was next. He won 21% of his starts, where his team gave him 0, 1, or 2 runs, 19 wins, 71 losses. Steve Carlton also won 21% of his games. He was 13 and 50. John Candelaria won 20% of his starts. He was 9 and 37. Mario Soto was next. He won 20% of his starts. 13 wins, 53 losses. Eric Shaw won 20% of his starts as well, 11 wins, 45 losses. And Bob Welch, Mike Flanagan, and Phil Negro all won 19% of their starts where their team gave them 0, 1, or 2 runs of support. Now, if you break it down by actual wins, Fernando Valenzuela had the most with 21, then Nolan Ryan had 19, Bobby Ojeda had 17, and Bob Welch and Dave Stieb each had 15 wins each. Now, if we look at the overall percentage, so the highest percentage of starts where his team got 0, 1, or 2 runs of support, number 1 on the list was Rick Honeycutt, who I believe pitched for Seattle and Texas, some pretty bad teams in the 1980s. 39% of his starts, his team gave him basically no support, 0, 1, or 2 runs. Second on the list was Rick Russell at 38% of his starts. Then you had Rick Malo, who pitched for some awful Braves teams in the 1980s, 36% of his starts. His team gave him 0, 1, or 2 runs. Same with Frank Tanana, 36%. Fernando Valenzuela, 35%. Then you had Nolan Ryan, 35% as well, along with Mario Soto and Scott Sanderson. And then you had Burt Blyleven and Mike Smithson, who had 33% of their starts, where their team gave them 0, 1, or 2 runs of support. If we look at the next category, starts where a team or where a pitcher got 3 to 5 runs of support from his team. Overall starts, number 1 was Bob Knepper, who pitched for the Houston Astros. He had 140 starts where his team gave him 3, 4, or 5 runs of support. Second on the list was Rick Rhoden. He got 133 starts where his team gave him 3 to 5 runs of support. Next was Bob Welch with 132. Jim Clancy had 130. Jack Morris had 129. Nolan Ryan and Dave Stieb both had 125. Floyd Bannister and Mike Flanagan had 118 starts. Mike Scott and Richard Dotson and Mike Krukow, all 3 of them had 114 starts where the team gave them 3 to 5 runs of support. The pitcher with the most starts, or most wins, I should say, with 3 to 5 runs of support, Jack Morris had 65, Bob Welch had 61, Charlie Huff had 57, Jerry Royce had 56, and Nolan Ryan had 54. Now, if we look at the winning percentage of the pitchers that received 3 to 5 runs of support during their starts, number 1 on the list was John Tudor. He won 70% of his starts where his team gave him 3, 4, or 5 runs of support. He had 44 wins and only 19 losses. Second on the list was Bob Welch, who won 69% of his starts. He had 61 wins, 27 losses. Next was Rick Russell, who won 69% of his starts as well. 41 wins, 18 losses. Next was Don Sutton, 69% as well, 49 wins, 22 losses. Ron Darling was next. He won 67% of his games, 41 wins, 20 losses. Next was Bill Gullickson, 67% as well, 48 and 24. Jerry Royce, 67% as well, 56 wins, only 28 losses. John Candelaria won 66% of his starts, 43 and 22. Next was Mike Scott, 66% as well. He won 51 games. He lost 26. Fernando Valenzuela, Eric Shaw, and Ron Guidry Round out the list, they all won 65% of the starts where their team gave them 3 to 5 runs of support. Now, as far as starts where they got or where they received 3 to 5 runs of support, so the pitchers that had the highest percentage of their starts with 3 to 5 runs of support, number one on the list was Ron Darling. Those 80s Mets teams, they had some really good players: Strawberry, Kevin McReynolds, Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, Lenny Dykstra. So Ron Darling had 47% of his starts where the Mets got 3 to 5 runs for him. Second was Eric Shao with the Padres. 46% of his starts, his team gave him 3 to 5 runs of support. Rick Rhoden and Bob Nepper, also 46% of their starts. Next was Dennis Eckersley. He got 45% of his starts, where his team gave him 3 to 5 runs of support. Jerry Royce and Shane Rawley, 44% of their starts. Mike Flanagan and Mike Moore, 43% of their starts, along with Rick Sutcliffe. They got 43%. John Candelaria, Ron Guidry, Walt Terrell, Bob Welsh, and Mike Krukow all received 3 to 5 runs in 42% of their starts. The next category is starts where a pitcher received 6 or more runs of support. So if you get 6 or more runs in a game, there's a good chance you're probably going to win the game. And the starter that received the most starts, where his team gave him 6 or plus runs, was Dave Stieb, who had 112 starts in the 1980s, where his team gave him 6 or more runs. Jack Morris was second with 111 starts. Third was Jim Clancy with 98. Next was Doyle Alexander with 95. Scott McGregor was next with 94. Those Baltimore Orioles had some really good offenses in the 1980s. Frank Tanana, 92 starts, where his team got 6 or more runs. So even though he was number one on 0, 1, or 2 runs, his team, in other respects, gave him a lot of support as well. Next was Dennis Martinez, 90 starts in the 1980s with 6 or more runs. Mike Krukow, 90 starts as well. Richard Dotson got 6 or more runs in 89 starts. Dan Petrie and Bob Welsh and Bruce Hurst all had 88 starts, where they got 6 or more runs. And to round out the list, Tommy John and Frank Viola both had 87 starts, where their team gave them 6 or more runs. Now, winning percentage, so when your team gave you 6 or more runs, which pitchers did the best at winning the games? And we actually had a tie at first between Joaquin Andahar and Rick Russell. Okay, they had 100% winning percentage. So in every game they pitched where their team gave them 6 or more runs, they came out with a W. Joaquin Andahar was a perfect 50-0 in those starts, and Rick Sutcliffe was 44-0 in the starts where his team gave him 6 or more runs. Next on the list was Rick Sutcliffe. He won 98% of his starts, where his team gave him 6 or more runs, 49 wins, only 1 loss. Bob Force, 98% as well, 49-1. Bob Welsh and Joe Niekro and Ron Darling, all 97% of their starts they won, where they got 6 or more runs. Nolan Ryan won 96% of his starts, where his team gave him 6 or more runs, 49 wins, only 2 losses. Mike Scott, 96% as well, 49 wins, only 2 losses. Mike Scott was 51-2 in starts. Charlie Liebrandt, 96% as well, 45-2. John Tudor, 96%, 44-2, along with Rick Mahler, 96%, 44-2 as well. And John Candelaria, 96% of the games that his team gave him 6 or more runs, he won, 43 wins and only 2 losses. Now the pitchers that won the most games with 6 or more runs was Jack Morris, had 83 wins, where his teams got him 6 or more runs. Dave Stieb had 72. Jim Clancy had 63. Charlie Huff, 61. Bob Welsh had 61 as well. And Dan Petrie, Doyle Alexander, and Scott McGregor all had 60 wins. So overall, 46%, or I should say 46 pitchers out of the 55 on the list won 90% of their games when their teams gave him 6 or more runs of support. So it just kind of shows you how much easier a pitcher's job was when his team gave him plenty of offensive support. Now the next category is a list of pitchers with the highest percentage of starts with 6 or more runs. Okay, and number one on the list was Storm Davis. Okay, and 39% of his 200 starts, his team gave him 6 or more runs. So pitching for the Orioles and the A's, 2 good offenses in the 1980s definitely helped his cause. Scott McGregor, 38% of his starts, his team gave him 6 or more runs. Steve Trout, 36%. Bruce Hurst, 35%, along with Mike Smithson and Dennis Martinez. Dave Stieb, Dan Petrie, Ron Guidry, Tommy John, all 34% of their starts, their team got a 6 or more runs. And Mike Boddicker, Doyle Alexander, Jack Morris, and Mike Krukow, all 33% of their starts, their team gave them 6 or more runs of support. Now, in the opposite direction, pitchers that had the most games where their team scored 0 runs for them during their starts. Okay, number one on the list was a tie between Frank Tanana and Rick Mahler. They had 27 starts where their teams basically got shut out. Okay, so like I said, Frank Tanana pitched on some pretty bad teams. Rick Mahler pitched for the Braves in the 80s. They weren't very good. Next, second on the list was Nolan Ryan. He had 22 starts where his team scored 0 runs for him. Bob Knepper had 22 starts as well, so Houston Astros right there at the top of the list. Steve Carlton had 20 starts where his team gave him 0 runs, along with Mario Soto. He had 20 starts as well. Joe Negro, another Astro, 19 starts where his team scored 0 runs for him. Scott Sanderson, Charlie Leibrandt, Joaquin Andahar, Jim Clancy, and Fernando Valenzuela all had 18 starts where their team scored 0 runs for them. Now, if we look at the starts where a pitcher got 1 run of support, number one on the list was Nolan Ryan. He had 42 starts where his team gave him 1 run of support. Second was Rick Honeycutt with 39, along with Jack Morris. They both had 39. Fernando Valenzuela and Bob Welch had 38 starts where their team only gave him 1 run of support. Frank Tanana, Burt Blyleven, and Jim Clancy all had 37 starts with 1 run of support. Charlie Huff, Mike Scott had 36 starts with 1 run, and Richard Dotson had 35 starts where they scored 1 run for him. Now, if we kind of add those together, so pitchers with the most starts where his team gave him 0 or 1 run of support. Okay, and number one on the list is another tie with Nolan Ryan and Frank Tanana. They both had 64 starts where their team gave them 0 or 1 run of support. Next was Rick Honeycutt with 59, Rick Mahler with 57, Jack Morris had 56, Fernando Valenzuela and Bob Knepper had 56 as well. Jim Clancy had 55, Bob Welch 54, and Charlie Huff had 52 starts where his team scored 0 or 1 run of support for him. Now, if we break that down by percentage, so what pitchers had the highest percentage of starts where their team gave them 0 or 1 run of support? And number one on that list was Charlie Leibrandt, who pitched for the Braves and the Royals in the 1980s. 74% of his starts, his teams gave him 0 or 1 run of support. So that just kind of shows you how frustrating it must have been for Charlie Leibrandt to take the hill every 4 or 5 days, basically knowing he was really not going to get a whole lot of runs to support. And Charlie Leibrandt wasn't a kind of dominant pitcher that could go out and win games 1-0, that's for sure. Second on the list was Rick Honeycutt. 71% of his starts, his team gave him 0 or 1 run of support. Bill Gullickson, 68% of his starts. Rick Mahler, 64%. Mike Krukow, 63% of his starts. Jim Clancy and Charlie Huff and Tommy John, 62% of their starts. They got 1 or 0 runs of support. And then Jack Morris, John Tudor, and Steve Trout, 61% of their starts where they got 0 or 1 run of support. Now, the pitchers that got the most run support from the 1980s, okay, Bruce Hurst finished number 1. He got 5.14 of runs of support in each start in the 1980s, so it definitely helped. He was pitching for the Boston Red Sox. They had some pretty good offenses back in the 1980s. Second on the list was Storm Davis. He got 5.01 runs of support every start. John Candelaria was next, 4.82 runs of support. Then you had Mike Smithson, 4.72. Jack Morris, 4.72 runs of support as well. Dan Petrie was next, 4.71. Steve Trout, 4.68. Ron Guidry, 4.66. Scott McGregor, 4.61. And Bobby Ojeda, 4.60 runs of support. Now, on the opposite end of that, pitchers who got the worst run support in the 1980s, number one on the list was Rick Honeycutt. He only got 3.7 runs of support. Steve Carlton was second, 3.77. Nolan Ryan was third with 3.86. Bob Knepper, 3.87, was fourth. Eric Schau, 3.89, was fifth. Rick Mahler was sixth at 3.93. Walt Terrell was seventh, 3.96. Rick Rhoden, 4.01, was eight. Mike Moore, 4.06, was nine. And Rick Russell, 4.06, and Rick Russell was 4.09. So in conclusion, as you can see, some pitchers got really good run support in the 1980s, and some pitchers got some pretty bad run support, but I just think it's interesting that we see some pitchers on both lists from the 1970s and from the 1980s. And so in my next video, like I said, I wanted to break down the run support for the pitchers from the 1990s. So we're talking guys like Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, Tommy Glavine, John Smoltz. You had a lot of pitchers in the 1990s throw a lot of games, but with the offenses exploding because of expansion, because of steroids and HGH, you started to see run support is going to kind of skyrocket because you obviously saw scoring go up, you saw averages go up. and so it'll definitely be a big contrast between definitely the 1970s, but also in the 1980s as well. Well, thanks for watching. Please leave a like, please leave a comment, let me know what you think of the video. Let me know who your favorite pitcher was from the 1980s and who you think was the most hard luck pitcher as well. Until next time, guys, I'm Salbo the Stat Guy. Take it easy.